We're going to listen to Mr. H, who is critical of a remake which is being headed up by Jordan Peele. Now, usually I'm very critical of the right, but they're not the only ones who sometimes manipulate popular culture for their own agenda. And unfortunately, it's being done with Candyman, the remake. So we're going to listen to his criticism and then respond.
So yeah, Tony Todd, right? Tony Todd, is he in this film? He shows up for all of about 60 seconds at the end as CGI. His face is CGI'd onto Yaya's body. That's it. And his voice. That's it. Massive misstep. They could have easily had him. Because they weave a narrative of the hive of Candymen, right? Of all these other black people that have been murdered. They're all black people, so white people. All these other black people that have been murdered across history have joined the hive of Candymen. It's the whole damn hive. The hive of Candymen, right? And they show one Candyman in particular, which is... I'm trying to see if they... I don't even know if he's credited, to be fair. Maybe Jameson? No. Or Gil Cartwright. It's a Candyman that was just giving out... He was giving out candy, basically. It was just a bit weird. You know, obviously a bit simple. Giving out candy to kids and stuff. Harmless, but a bit weird. And that's the Candyman that we see. Now, coincidentally, that man, when he was alive, had a hook for a hand. And I'm like, oh, come on now. There's no nuance here. There's no subtlety. What? So he gets killed in cold blood by the police, which he does, and then he miraculously comes back as a Candyman, does he? I mean, where's the subtlety there, ladies and gents? Where is it? Come on. But that Candyman could have been played by Tony Todd. But it wasn't. It was played by someone else, and they missed the trick. They really missed the trick. They just had this guy, you know, nice to expand it, but have some more connection, you know. It's just something. Be a bit more respectful to the original in some regard. And I just felt like it.
Now, to be careful, Mr. H is not saying it's a bad movie, only a lot of questionable things are occurring within Candyman. First of all, it's really not much of a horror film, so it's being just misadvertised and misrepresented. The actual amount of, quote, scariness within the film is very, very weak. So just as a horror film, it doesn't really exist. So it's being misrepresented in terms of continuing the tradition of the original Candyman and its legacy. It's just not a horror film. Secondly, it's just extremely political, which again, that's perfectly legitimate and correct. What is not legitimate and correct is to basically be doing propaganda. And apparently the movie just is being done in such a way that you can't really avoid its politics whatsoever. It's being extremely explicit, preachy, and making its points with kind of very sledgehammer approach. Now, playing devil's advocate, the best you can say is that the original Candyman was also very political. I mean, it's a very, very forceful critique of the Reagan and Bush administrations, and I share that critical attitude. I think they're really monstrous bunch of people. They're responsible for at least killing hundreds of thousands, if not millions, of innocent people worldwide through their policies. So no argument for me that Reagan or Bush are a bunch of evil monsters. But the first one, even while making a lot of devastating points about how race, poverty, and oppression are all interlinked, was much, much more subtle about these things in terms of telling a very frightening, kind of interesting mixture of a ghost story as well as a gothic romance. All that is wiped away here. It's just a much, much more straightforward, polemical, and very confusing kind of movie, because even though it talks about gentrification over and over again, it doesn't really show it, which the first Candyman did through a lot of cleverness and through camera angles. And then finally, in terms of its kind of underlying politics of production, there's a lot of question marks and problems. This thing is getting an extremely high Rotten Tomatoes score, and overall, you can't avoid it. White critics seem to be hailing it as a very, very good movie. Not just it's okay, but it's an incredible achievement of some kind within the genre, and it simply isn't. It's a pretty small film, so even if you don't like it, you don't have to enjoy it that much. But the Rotten Tomato scores are really quite incredible and very hard to believe, because this is being released while Lisa Joy is actually being heavily criticized with her film, with Hugh Jackman, and she's an Asian American. And then you also have Neil Blomkamp, which has received an extremely low grade, and he's a white South African. You can kind of tell what's going on, that apparently only certain minorities are being given a kind of special immunity, and whatever they do is just really, really great work, no matter the actual quality of the product. Now, I'm sure a lot of these critics honestly believe that Candyman is a new masterpiece, but given just how high the score is and that the audience score is a little bit more cool, it seems to suggest critics are really just doing propaganda for the film and not really looking at it critically. But it does have its saving graces, and Mr. H does emphasize the lead performance by Yaya is really good. That's consistent. There's also some good things to be said about its homage to The Shining and other horror classics. That's also well done. But overall, this is just an okay film. It does what it's supposed to do as a psychological thriller. Again, it's not really a horror film. And if you like that part of it, fine. If you like its politics and already agree with its kind of very aggressive pro-black message, that's also fine. But again, if you're not into its political ideology and you don't care about the genre, or you just automatically think anything Jordan Peele does is genius, this is for you. But if you're not within that circle, then this is going to be a very plodding piece of work and not really worthy of people's attentions. So I'm not eager to really see Candyman for myself, given all this. I'll probably eventually give it a chance. Again, you want to give everyone a chance, but if this is where they're coming from, it's kind of disappointing because the original Candyman and its sequel, again, not perfect, did give a really interesting but flawed kind of political commentary on the horror genre, but it never lost its touch in terms of being a really horrifying and effective movie. And this just seems to be the opposite. It's putting its political agenda first and doesn't really care whether it's a good or bad movie. It's just so obsessed with its political agenda that everything has been subordinated to that. So that's a kind of shame because Candyman does deserve better. There we are with the latest in terms of popular culture regarding Candyman and its remake with Jordan Peele at the helm. Thanks for listening.